Supplemental learning that is mandatory, so not optional, mandatory for 550 and 450 courses. And I wanted to just talk about it right now really quickly in case I can't come back for the other part of it later. So what that means is that for 550 and 450, your students have a requirement to go to the Success Center. It's not a huge requirement, but they can either go to this one, right there, or they can go to Fontana, or they can go to Chino. Any of the three places is, they'll support math up there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass around the validation forms, and you have to find out which one you're teaching. So the 18-week 450, the student comes in the first time they're supposed to do an activity, which, according to this, is August 27th through September 7th. And that's when they're allowed to do that activity because it's tied to the material in the course as much as we can. So that first thing on the 450 is about neuroplasticity. So they're going to be learning about brain research. And so they come in during that period of time. They can do either a workshop, a learning group, or a DLA. It's their choice. If we have a workshop that says neuroplasticity, it would count, and we'd sign it and stamp it. And then we give that to the student, and they're responsible for this. So you could collect this as much as you want throughout the semester, but you don't have to. You can just, at the end of the semester, when it's all done, collect them. Okay, you've got to turn in your validation forms. And that's it. And what they should have, since there are 5 hours of supplemental learning required for 450, there's 5 activities because they're approximately an hour each. So basically they'd go up there. It's about once every 2 weeks. And you'll notice there's a break here a little bit, especially if you get to some of the fast tracks. They might break and then have to come in. Those are only about a week because they're twice as fast. So. But we kind of pace them according to what they're learning in the course. It's not perfect, but it's close. And that reinforces what they're doing in the course, but they do some hands-on activities, plus they get some ability to kind of think about it with their own interpretation of what's going on with that material. So for example, function transformations, they'll kind of think about, oh, okay, well here's how I think about it. They'll meet with a tutor, they'll do the activity, and then they'll kind of come to an agreement about hopefully what it is. And hopefully that's the right agreement about what it is. But they can do any of these three. The important thing for you as an instructor to know is just to promote this, that if you're in 550 or 450, 550 has 7 hours, so it's a little bit more. But but those activities are tailored to them. So they start with growth mindset, and then they go through like fraction operations, unknowns, ratios, things like that. Okay, so they will get this when they first come in, so you don't have to pass this out. You just have to tell them to go over there and start. And everything starts for every class, unless you're in the 14-week. Which starts on September 10th. But it starts basically the first week that we're fully open. So we'll be open limited basis the first week of school, starting on Wednesday. We have workshops and learning groups happening that kind of get students kind of progress. But then we're fully open the next week for full tutoring services, all these activities, DLAs, all that stuff. So I'm just going to pass these around. If you want to take a picture of the dates, just so you know, so find which class yours is. If you want to, you can come in and just grab one. We don't have them printed yet, but if you want to, that first week of class, come up and you can grab one that's appropriate for your class. But again, you do not have to give it to the students. They'll get it right when they come in for the first time. What's that? Yeah, they're all on the drive too. So you can, I was going to pass them around in case that's easier, but they are also on the drive under the DLA. And we're revising some of the DLAs. That's why there's no DLAs listed in those courses. They're all in the old courses. We're kind of tweaking them a bit, some of them. So there's no DLAs listed, but you should be able to eventually in the Google Drive see what is happening with those particular activities. And the workshops and learning groups are all kind of based on those activities. Yeah.
420 won't require.
Okay, so good question, and I have no idea why. So if you would prefer to have in your class Success Center integration with your class, Wonderful. So there's this generic activity form that's a validation form. It doesn't have particular activities, but you can specify that. You can say, hey, you have to go to 3 workshops. You have to go to, well, there's 4 on this page, but you have to get more. So you have to go to 10 workshops. It doesn't really matter. You as an instructor could decide whatever you want. You could, since you have access to the 450 materials, if you're doing 420, you could see there's activities there, DLAs. You can say, hey, I want you to really go in and do the DLA on factoring. And I'm going to see for the word factoring on the activity. We don't have DLA, but we'll write it in. Because this is more for the courses that don't have that supplemental learning requirement. But it's always available for you to do. And I would encourage you, if you're teaching a 420, to look through the 450 activities, those 5, and see if there's anything that matches up with what you're doing and you would like them to participate in.
Do we just have to use the 450 form?
You could. So the only issue with that are there are topics in 450 that are not in 420. So you get down to, I think the logarithmic modeling is not. So you get down to that point, and then but you could just have them fill out that form. Tell them that. Just say, hey, you're not doing number 5, but you could use the other ones which we are covering. That's totally fine. Basically, they're kind of independent. They're going to go in and find the form that they need with our help. And so if they say, hey, I'm in 420, but my instructor wants me to use the 450 form and then do the neuroplasticity, blah, 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 we'll make sure that happens.
I make my students, even though they have an option between workshops, learning groups, and the directed learning activities, I try to force my students to do the directed learning activities because they're very rich. It gives them the opportunity to actually work on problems themselves and maybe in pairs and groups as well. I encourage them to go in with a group of 2 or 3 of their peers in the class, and they can all work together in that DLA room. With the workshop or the learning group, I'm not saying that they're a bit more passive than active. And I would prefer my students to be a little more active when they're working through these activities. And also, I think it's really important to make sure that you don't just tell them this the first day of class and then say the last day, okay, make sure to turn in your Success Center form. They're like, what? Oh, it's something that you have to consistently remind them of, not just for the percentage, but remind them, remember, if you're struggling, and just so you realize, students will be struggling this semester because of the new framework of Math 450. Everyone with the new state legislation is allowed to just place themselves directly into intermediate algebra, whether they're ready or not. So you're going to have students in there that are not necessarily where they should be. So that's why we have support courses, which some of you are teaching some of the 600 courses that are teaching some of the topics that might be prerequisites to that or related to that. But I think that's where the Math Success Center is going to be a very important and helpful tool. The Success Center does a phenomenal job, and they've got some great tutors over there. So regularly encourage them through the semester to visit the Success Center, not just for that. Okay.